like this, you know, and then for the 75th, right, show why he's Batman's the greatest superhero in the whole DCU. Otherwise, like, you know, I always say when they were like, AVX, who wins? It's like, Batman wins. You know, my feeling is that just the 75th, you got to celebrate why he's the best. So it'll be a lot of fun that year, you know, 2014, and with Zero Year, you know, just so you know, like that's the arc we're in now. If you haven't picked it up yet, it's Batman's origin redone for a new generation, and super quick, and then I'll get to questions from you guys. Like, part of the idea when I started thinking about it was like I had this idea when I did the Zero issue that was like, I'd like to do an early Batman story. I'd like to show this time period that's never been shown before, because I love Bruce Wayne in the Frank Miller stuff. That's my favorite Batman in the world, is Year One and Dark Knight Returns. But in the present-day continuity, and in the way, growing up in New York City, I mean, Year One was the city around me, you know. I couldn't go to Times Square because I would get mugged, you know, or I went there to get like a fake ID. You would my parents, so seriously, I would go to, you know, there, and it would be like a, you know, a Asian name and me, and you know, it just didn't work, like the fake IDs. But and you know, you'd go to the arcade there, Playland, if any of you were from New York, and it was just a terrible area. You know, it was just like a rite of passage. You get flashed when you walk through the arcade, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So that city that you saw in Year One was very real to me, and that's when Batman caught my imagination as a character that grew up alongside me, you know, in 1987, 1988. And so when I was thinking about doing the origin, and Dan and the rest of DC was like, you know, you have to make a new origin, I was like, no, we kept Year One. That was the whole point when we did 52. We kept Year One. And they were like, it doesn't fit anymore, you know. James Jr. would be 6 years old. Jim Gordon has a different origin. Selina Kyle has a different origin. Things. You know, everybody has a different origin. It just doesn't work. It can't be the origin. So either you make something or something else is going to come along to be the origin. I was like, well, nobody's doing that origin if we don't do it. I'm not letting anybody else do that. So I was thinking about it, and I was like, let's do it. And so Zero Year became, what if we tried to make it as relevant as Year One was to me as a kid with the city and what it's like today? So when you see What Do You Love About Gotham, Bruce, in that first issue, what we love about Gotham is a huge part of the storyline and what Gotham is today versus what it was in 1987. So to me, in the city today, the fears are very different. You know, there's still urban decay and, you know, drugs and crime and those things, but you're much more afraid, I would think, you know, in Boston and New York, of kind of, you know, fire trucks suddenly coming down the street on a Tuesday afternoon or a Sunday morning when it's sunny because of some random horrifying act of violence, you know, that doesn't necessarily attach to some kind of gang war or that sort of stuff. And so I wanted to create a villain in the Red Hood gang that represents that. And again, spoilers, like in the next issue, the Red Hood leader, if you've been reading it, what happens is at the end of issue 2, do you mind if I don't want to like spoil it. But at the end of issue 2, the Red Hood gang is this gang that's terrorizing Gotham in that way, where they seem to just have no sense to what they do. They're just randomly violent, and the leader of the Red Hood gang basically it gets people to join the gang by blackmailing them, and there's no rhyme or reason to who he blackmails. He'll come and say, I have, you know, footage of you doing this, or I'll kill you unless you join the gang. It'll be school teachers, women, men, you know, anybody. And there's no logic to it. And what happens is, at the end of issue 2, he blows up Bruce's base in Crime Alley. I was kidding with Jeff that if he brought me a beer, I would be forever grateful, and he brought me a beer. So don't tell anybody.
Hey, on the Sam Adams Boston Lager.
And all.
There you get crazy spoilers.
And I borrowed this key chain from this devoted fan right here.
Thank you.
/ alcoholic.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, guys. I have to totally hide that.
You don't have to hide it.
You're in Salem, Dan. What? Pour a little out for Dan. Not really. But anyway, like, they try and kill him at the end, and his place is burning. This is a spoiler for issue 3, or 23. And the Red Hood leader's standing over him, and he's like, he takes the portrait of Bruce's parents down from the wall, and he's kind of like, I just want you to know that that was a really important night to me too, Bruce, the night your parents died. It must have been the worst night of your life until tonight, obviously, when we're going to fucking kill you, you know? But it was important to me too because, you know, it was the first night my foster parents locked the door. And it was the first night that our neighbors came home with a Saturday night special. And he's like, that's when I realized the importance of the randomness of violence. And he was like, that's when I realized that people were afraid because there was no reason for your parents to get killed. It wasn't a gang incident. It wasn't that they were walking and they had something, some jewel that everybody wanted. It was because some guy walked down an alley and killed them. And he was like, I realized at that moment to form this gang. And he's like, that's what my gang is about. We wear the red hood because Little Red Riding Hood invites the violence of the wolf with the red hood. She wants to be eaten. And he says, we want violence to come get us. We are the random violence of the world. And when you accept that emptiness at the whole of the center of reality, which is that none of it means anything because tomorrow you could be blown up, on the walking to work, and that you should just give up and join us and acknowledge that meaninglessness, then you can be part of the Red Hood gang. And he's like, so thank you for walking your parents down that alley that night, because that's when this gang was born. And then he's like, hopefully what I'm about to do will inspire some little kid out there someday too. And then he shoots Bruce twice through the portrait of his parents' faces. He's like, bang, bang. And the faces blow off and stuff like that. And then that's only the beginning. It's like the first 7 pages of the issue. So but that was all spoiler alert. But the idea is, it's a story that matters tremendously to me, and I've worked harder on this one with Greg than anything we've done, in the way that I wanted it to be something that felt relevant, and you might hate it, or you might love it, but it matters to us deeply, and we've tried to be pretty fearless on it. And if you're a Grant fan, there's nobody nicer in comics to me than Grant has been. Whether you hate Grant or you like Grant, every San Diego I bumped into him, and he always asked me what we had coming up on Batman. I'm so intimidated by him, because I grew up on Grant and whatever. And I told him about Detective, about Black Mirror, and he was so supportive. And then I told him about Court of Owls the next year, and he was again so supportive. And then he'll also tell you about his ideas where he's like, and he has like a tractor beam stare where you're like talking to him, and and he draws you in. And he was telling me about this scene in The Return in Batman where the bat flies through the window. Do you know this issue where it's the old bat? He's like, and the fucking bat, he's like, it comes and it's bloody and it's this and it's that and it flies through the window, and you're like, yes, it's like, he like draws you in. He's amazing. But anyway, I told him about 0 Year. I saw him at San Diego this year, like just a few weeks ago, and I was really nervous because I was like, what does he think of it, and blah, blah, blah. And I saw him, and he couldn't have been more gracious and nice, and he was like, I'm going to mention 0 Year in ink because I think that you guys trying to do something new is important. And he was so nice and gracious and wonderful. And then he was like, just as this is totally personal, so I shouldn't even share it, but he was like, and how's it been? I know there must be a lot of pressure on you. And I was like, oh, I'm really lucky. I feel really lucky about it, that everything's going so well. And he's like, no, but how's it really been? There's a lot of pressure on you, with Batman. I was like, it's been really nerve-wracking. And he was like, you know what? You can call me anytime and talk about it. And he was, seriously, I teared up, like literally in the lobby of the Hyatt. I was like, I was just like, no one more supportive and nicer. So seriously, that guy deserves all the accolades in the world, not just for being an incredible mastermind and a visionary and inspiring on the book, but also a gentleman and somebody who's been very gracious to us as greener people that came in behind him. So anyway, that's what 0 Year is about. It's about trying to modernize Gotham and make this story something that is about what if Batman formed today. Not 6 years ago, and I just had this, it was at breakfast with Dan, and he's like, but it is 6 years ago, and I'm like, no, it's 6 years ago, but no one wants to see, like, hey, that's the suit, 6 years, everything is 6 years old, like, he's using, like, bad internet, and, like, it's just like, nobody wants to see that. Like, you want to see what if he formed today, right? Wait till you see his haircut, dude, it's crazy, I can't even get into it, but, like, his suit is different, it's modern, his Batmobile is modern, it's like a hot rod, it's badass with yellow details and, like, huge tires, and we wanted to feel like, what if Batman was made today to fight against this guy who's basically saying, everything is meaningless, and you mean nothing, and your lives mean nothing, and all there is the random chaos of violence. So you might as well not dream about becoming anything, or try and strive to be anything that you think you should be in the world, because it'll all end tomorrow, or it could on a bus, or in a building, or walking down the street with a bullet, or anything. So give up, and join our gang, because that's what it's about. And what Bruce needs to learn in the story is that Bruce Wayne needs to mean something. You can't have Bruce Wayne legally dead as a corpse in the ground. And you can't fight as a vigilante from a nameless base. You need to inspire people. You need to be both. You need to have your vigilante side mean something and matter, and you need to mean something and matter as a person, as a legacy to your parents. Your father was a damn doctor in a city hospital when he could have been a billionaire and nobody. But he went in there and helped people that needed it, who were shot, gang members and everything, every day, because he cared about making an example of himself to make the city better. And that you needed to get your hands dirty. And your mother set up schools and orphanages because she tried to engage. And so for you to just be like a drunk playboy and pretend that that's a mask, that doesn't work for me as a writer anymore, that idea. Bruce Wayne needs to matter. He can be like funny and a playboy or whatever on the surface, but he also needs to do things in Gotham that inspire people. And that's part of it. There's a balance between Bruce and Batman, and he needs to learn how to make them both mean something in the story, and that's what it's about, the first arc. And the story is really, again, spoiler, but it's people are like, oh, you're doing 11 issues of the origin. How many? Is this going to be like a whole issue of the pearls falling? And I'm like, no, well, I wouldn't mind that so much. With Greg drawing it, he'd make it exciting. But the idea, it's a very fast story. It's 4 issues till he becomes Batman and he fights the Red Hood gang, and then it's 3 issues in a transformed Gotham because of something horrifying that Edward does, and then it's 4 issues again in a transformed Gotham that you saw a tease of at the beginning of the thing that's almost like a post-apocalyptic, overgrown Gotham, for reasons that have to do with one of your favorite villains too, I hope, you know? So in that way, it's really meant to be a giant 3-chapter, high-octane, bombastic, irreverent punk rock Batman origin that's colorful and bright and zany, but beneath the surface has all of the work that we try and do on our more obviously literary stories. Like Joker has all of these allusions in it on the surface, you know, to Peter Pan and to Frankenstein and to even something like Hamlet. I mean, when they stay on, as corny as that sounds, but the two of Bullock and Gordon talking on the roof at the beginning with the ghost of the Joker kind of haunting the scene is supposed to be that. So there are all those kind of references on the surface of that story, and with this one, the fun was to flip it so that all the notes that I usually put underneath the bass notes in a song, like for example, are on the surface. So you see these big symbols in it. You see the red thread, which harkens back to this folklore about the red thread of fate. You know, that there's a folktale about that when you're born, a red thread connects you to the person that you're going to love one day, and the red thread connects Bruce to Batman in the story. And the witch's eye that gets lowered into the cave that tells the future for the Gorgons, and the Gorgons being something in ink as well. Now, all of those things are in there, you know, all of those things are meant to be there, but I'm trying to make it fun and crazy on the surface and over the top, so that when you see those things and they come in loud in the story, it's a very different way for me to write. So I hope you see that me and Greg and FCO and Danny on the art team and the writing team are trying to invert the way we normally tell a Batman story. Like, it's supposed to be 180 degrees from year one, but also from Joker. It's meant to be a totally, like, to show you, I don't use any narration. It's fast intercutting. It's very, you know, kinetic and huge action and all of that kind of stuff, and bright and colorful and purples and yellows and all that stuff. So it's meant to be a story that's supposed to be the origin for a different generation, you know? We can't touch the hem of year one. That's a masterpiece that nobody can ever top, period. It just is what it is. But that doesn't mean you should never try and do an origin that I think that would be exciting for now, that makes it modern for now. It doesn't mean it would be as good. Maybe it would be, you know, much worse. But we're doing our very best to give you something special that you guys can be proud of or be excited by. Honestly, we're trying, like, harder than, I mean, I can't try any harder, you know what I mean? And neither can Greg or FCO. To give you something, hopefully, that you're going to be really happy with. And I'm really happy with it, you know, and there are a lot of surprises coming between the Riddler and the villains in the second half, and the second section, and then in the third section, which are all really fun. So that's my whole spiel about Zero Year off the top of my head. And I feel like I can open it and let you guys ask stuff if you want, unless you want to hear anything else from me about anything that I'm not thinking of. Is there anything I'm not thinking of?
I'm just...
Yeah, I'm happy. If you want to talk about other books too, I can talk about other books like Superman or whatever, The Wake or American Vampire 2. But maybe what we can do is like try and give priority first to Batman questions, because I know it's a Batman. You guys came here mostly for Batman, I would think, you know? Then we have crazy stuff planned on Batman, I promise.
So what I was planning on doing is I can call out and then they can ask a question. If we could just limit it to one question because we don't have a ton of time. So give me hands and I'll call on somebody. Titans?
Batman stories are kind of dark. Is that kind of like, this is a little too dark?
No, I mean, yeah. Sometimes. Well, I'll tell you an example, and this is me talking because Dan's not here. The one thing that I was going to do in Death of the Family that they fought me on Because some people think we were going to kill somebody, but we're never going to kill. I was never planning on killing anyone. When you read it in the trade, you'll see. Because it's a lot clearer when it gets out of continuity, because they were like, oh, we'll make it seem like the family breaks up and doesn't talk. And I'm like, that's fine, that's totally cool. But that's not the repercussion of it. The real repercussion of it is what Joker is saying, and it's much clearer when you read it this way. I mean, I tweaked the lettering just to make sure you really get hurt by it. Reading it is what the Joker was trying to explain was that one day your family will be dead because you want us to stay alive. Your villains are what make you the thing that you've always wanted to be, which is legendary and not human, and something that transcends the pain that you felt as a child. And all of those things that you suffer as a human being and try and transcend as Batman, we make you. We play the game with you all the time. They make you, as much as you get older and you rely on them, you love them for who they are out of the mask. In the mask, you actually hate them. You don't want them there because they make you seem weak as Batman. As people, you love them out of the mask. That might be so. But deep down, you wish them dead so that you could be Batman and never Bruce or whoever you are under the cowl. And what he's saying is, so why don't you just do it and have a mercy killing right now at this table? Because underneath their faces, they're just tender flesh. Underneath our faces, you and me, there's just a grin and a bat skull. So do it and be eternal with me. And what the family sees is that there's truth in that. And it doesn't mean that it is true that one day they'll all be dead and it'll just be Joker and Batman. That might be my opinion personally, that one day it will come down to Joker and Batman in the far future. Maybe you'll see hints of that or stuff if he comes back. But the feeling is that, the feeling for me is that that's what that was about, was a truth that doesn't matter if they have breakfast tomorrow or if they get together in a month. But they saw something that was true in the future and are horrified about Batman. And Joker says, no matter if they, now in the new version, he says, no matter if they come back to you one day, they'll always have a little piece of me in them because they'll know the truth that one day they'll all be buried. And looking down at a table like this from the sky, silent the way they're silent now as you and I fight it out because you kept me alive and all your villains, and we'll be the family that you really come back to in the end and not them. And so that's the truth at the end of that storyline, you know. And so the one thing that I actually, what I was getting at was I did actually, there's a spoiler again that I shouldn't say, I did try and cut Alfred's hand off, and they, nobody knows that, but it wasn't going to be a tape that came to Bruce, it was going to be Alfred's hand that comes, and it was going to be like, oh, here's your right hand that you need, and DC really fought me on it. It was like, there's no, you know, he has a hand in the cartoon, and he has a hand, or whatever. I was like, he's also MI6 in the cartoon, whatever, but they fought me on it, and I agreed at the time that was too gruesome. I was like, maybe that's too gruesome, and now I totally regret it and wish I had taken his hand off, honestly. I really do, and I love Alfred more than any other character, but even if you reattached it, to have the scar, you know, would be something, for me, that would be there forever. And you never know if Joker did something to that hand that's still in Alfred. You know, there's something to me that I wish I, I've never said that out loud, but that's one thing that I do wish I wish I had gone more gruesome. You know.
They'll do it when the doctor's regenerating next time.
Well, next time what I'll do if the Joker comes back, he'll just kill Alfred on the first page. No, he won't really. I love Alfred. Like, what's the point in killing Alfred? Do you know what I mean? Like, if I had some other thing, like, why kill him unless you're trying to just really make everything so grim and dark and horrifying, you know, for Bruce? I mean, I understand the desire in some ways, you know, but I don't know. That relationship is eternal. I don't know.
Okay, sure, right there.
How did you come up with the turning page in Court of Owls?
The page that turned, the issue that turns, that was all Greg. I wrote to him, if you see my scripts for him, I always say things where I'm like, I always tell him what the page is about. That's the way I try and write. If any of you guys are aspiring writers, like, I panel everything and I write everything full script. And Greg and I did not get along. I don't know if you've heard that story, but Greg and I really didn't like each other when we first met because he was like used to working from outlines that were like 5 pages long, and I write like 30-page scripts, you know? So he was all like, I don't think, he was like, you know, can you just do it by outline because I really feel like your storytelling, your writing is going to get, your writing might get in the way of the,
What?
It's awesome. I was like, I really feel like he he was like, I really feel like your writing might get in the way of the art. And I was like, well, I feel like your goddamn art might get in the way of my writing. We really didn't get along. We were both calling Bob Harris and Dan, being like, somebody might have to lead this book, Bob. And what happened was they were like, get on the phone and talk about the story and see the designs he makes. And we did for the owls. And he made these amazing designs, the masks and everything, and the hoods, and I was like, of the talons, and I was just like, this guy's amazing. And since then, we've actually become like best friends, like literally outside of comics. Like, I'm going to Chicago next week, and I'm only going because he and his wife are going, and I'm going with my wife. Like, I have no desire to go to Chicago next week. And I was excited to come here to be like in Boston, and I was like, really, we have to go to Chicago? And he's like, come on. Like, all right, fine. So we're going to Chicago, we're going to Dublin to go together. I mean, he's one of my mentors and best friends in the world outside of comics. If we never did another comic together, he'd still be like a brother of mine. So anyway, with that page, I always tell him, I'm like, hey, here's the script, but you can change anything. And I was like, the feeling I want here is I just want disorientation, like Batman is spinning and going crazy, and anything you can think to make that happen, like, you know, you could do like broken panels or whatever you want, anything you come up with. And I say that all the time, anything you want to do. And he was like, what if we make the whole book turn around? And I thought about it for a minute, and I was like, people might think that's a misprint, but then I'm like, all right, let's do it. And DC was like, no way, there's no way we're doing that. and Greg wrote this impassioned email that was just awesome, that was like, sometimes you guys have to be foolish in life. That's what Steve Jobs, he was like a Steve Jobs quote. And it was like, you never get anything great unless you're foolish at times. It was beautiful and inspiring. And like, and they were kind, and then I just chimed in. I was like, ditto. Like what he said. What he said. And then they actually relented and let us do it. And the funniest part of it was like, I was like, awesome, man, those guys are chicken shit. He was like, yeah, they're chicken, man. They're like, who's going to think it's a misprint? And then we got the PDF for it, and the PDF reads vertically like this. And I was like, see, what the hell? It reads fine. And then I got my issues in the mail, and I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, there's a misprint. It goes like this. And I went online, and I was like on Twitter, I was like, you know, there's something in Batman 5 that is definitely deliberate, even if you don't think it's deliberate. And Greg called me up like 30 seconds after I tweeted it, and he's like, don't be a pussy. If they don't get it, they don't get it. And I was like, fine. So I was like, oh, sorry. I was like, sorry, delete, you know. And then the funniest thing is like 20 minutes later, he got his copies, and I see him go on Twitter, and he's like, there's a goddamn misprint in that. I called him up, and I was like, dude, take your own advice. Like, it's not a misprint. And he took it down, too. But we both were stunned at how, we didn't realize how weird it looked until we saw it in print. Because they sent it to us digitally, which you just read vertically. You don't actually have to turn your computer, you know what I mean? You can turn the image. So that's how that came about.
Way in the back, please.
Thanks. Yeah, well, it happened to us too. But I mean, my feeling is, you know, whenever you can do something that is different, I mean, that's one of the things is I feel like comics are so exciting right now with all the different innovations digitally and the kind of support behind creator own work, and you have to keep it exciting in fun ways, and not gimmicky ways, but you know, like fun ways, where if you have a chance to do something risky, you do it. And so, you know, you'll see stuff in issue 24 where I was just like, Greg, this page is about Batman searching Gotham for what the Red Hood gang is doing next, but I don't want to have a boring page where he's like driving around. So why don't we do something where it's like 3 silhouetted images of Batman over a map of Gotham with pins in it and stuff. And he was like, I'll do you one better. And he did like a crazy, awesome spread, a double spread that's just a map of Gotham with Alfred and Batman's shadows long over the whole thing, you know? And I was like, awesome. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff, if you can think of ways of visual storytelling that fit the story, that are different, I'm like, you know, go for it all the time, because, you know, it's the fun, I think, of right now, the challenge of seeing books that are so strong out there all the time, from Marvel and Image and DC2. You got to up your game, you know? I mean, that's one thing about Greg is like, No, Greg, he's significantly older than me, and he's like also been around a long time. But I've never met anybody hungrier to do a good job for you guys ever. Like, that dude redraws every page. When I'm like, that page is great, he's like, it sucks. And he like goes back and does it. I'm like, okay, it sucked. And he like, but I thought it was awesome. I really did. And he just does it again on his own and makes it better and better and better. I mean, all he wants is to improve his storytelling and do cool things issue to issue. When all he has to do is just sit back on his laurels and just draw and spin his wheels and do fine. I mean, his mediocre work would be great, but he's not like that at all. He's all about trying to impress you guys, not for the sake of showing off, but for making better product every month. I mean, he's inspiring to work with that way, you know. That was the way Stephen King was. It was like, you expect that sort of person to just be like, I could phone it in and still do awesome work, but they don't. They get in there like a young, hungry creator and do something that makes you feel like you got to keep up with them, you know, and it's exciting.
Nightwing?
So I really like your take on Bruce Wayne and Batman thought-wise. So with the New 52 timeline, how do you think Bruce Wayne would accept having 4 Robins, a Batgirl, and a Batwing while, you know, you have 1 paralyzed and 2 dead? Why would you continue to, you know, pull people in?
See, that there are questions like the continuity questions I always just duck, and I'm always like, what do you think? And I'm like, right, yeah, exactly. I mean, my feeling with the continuity stuff is, you know, if you kind of think of it so like literally that it's 5 years and that it's very hard to justify those things and make it make sense. But when you look at the individuated stories, it makes a lot of sense, you know, because they seem, it's like it happens in compressed time when you think of it as 5 years. But what I would say is that if I had to come up with a reason, it's what the Joker says actually in the trade, the new one, which is in the Death of the Family, where he's like, why do you think you get rid of them so fast? You know, so you could read it and see the explanation there. Why do you think you move on from one to the next, you know, as he's holding the knife, you know, it's pretty fun.
This young man's had his hand up for a while.
Yeah. How do you feel if you kill off a character? Do you feel guilty if fans aren't going to like it, if they're not going to react?
Well, I haven't killed anybody yet.
Well, if you are going to, then what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it would be, I gave a lot of thought to should I kill somebody in a couple storylines. You know, but I really feel like you only kill somebody if you have a better story going forward from their death than you do with them alive. And that's the way I felt about continuity. I didn't have better stories for Batman's rich history than existed, so I fought with the other Bat writers to keep his history intact. Meaning I didn't have a story that would be better than, you know, Cataclysm or Nightfall or that stuff for those time periods, so why erase them was my feeling, you know? So I feel that way about killing characters, which is if you have a story going forward that you think challenges the character in a way that's going to make them even more interesting and heroic and complicated and rich, then go for it, you know? But if you don't kill them for the sake of having a news story or something like that. And I can tell you that I think what Grant has in his mind for what we could do with Batman and what was going to happen with Damian is a great story that way. And I understand exactly why he did Damian the way he did. And I think, you know, it was a very bold and challenging move, but it was probably the right move for the things he wanted to do. But that's what I would say about killing. You know, I'm perfectly fine killing characters, you know, and I have no problem with it. But I would only do it if I had a better story with them dead. Otherwise, why take them away?
The young lady in the back.
Well, that's a good question. What?
It was really intense. I just feel like it kind of was blowing my mind.
I understand. And I totally, you know, that was one thing I thought about hard. Like, do I kill someone? Do I have the faces really off? And I'm not going to say there wasn't pressure to do stuff in that direction, but my feeling really was, like, what the Joker is genuinely saying is, I'm proving to you that I could have done this right now. And if he keeps you alive the way you are, you know that one day it will happen. And it's a bigger punishment and terror for you to live thinking, Batman is going to put me in this exact situation where it's really going to happen one of these days to each of us one at a time. And Joker is actually giving you a gift of going home and nightmarishly thinking about it. Like, he's saying, I don't even have to touch you. I just put you here, and show you how vulnerable you are, because he doesn't tell you everything. He keeps secrets from you, and he wants us alive and you dead, whether he wants to admit it or not. Because at the end of the day, you make him human. And Batman, the one thing he does not want to be is human. He wants to be eternal. And we make him eternal because we are eternal. We are the villains that are his court in terms of his, legacy. The legend of Batman exists with Joker and Riddler and whoever. Not Edward Nygma, not whoever Joker is under the face or anything. So what he's saying is, in my mind, and I stand by this as much as I know some people wanted someone to die or something gruesomer to happen. And I'm not going to say that there wasn't pressure to do it, to take Jason's face or to take somebody's face or to do something. And I really thought about it, honestly, and I did consider it. But I felt like it would be, for me personally, I felt like it would be a cheap shot. Because if I took their faces off, they'd go back on in 5 minutes, and you know it. And if I took one of their faces off, I'd have a dangling plot thread I had no interest in continuing with. So what I wanted to do was Joker to say, I could have done everything horrible to you right now, and I didn't, just to show you that he's going to let it happen again one day. So I'm going to let you live and be healthy and go home and feel great, physically. Because tomorrow maybe I'll do it, But you know that it's his fault. So that was the point, was to create a deep psychological scar than anything that will, and this is what I'm going to say, like, if Joker is saying that, how do you think he's going to feel? He's basically giving Batman an out and he's saying, we love you. Your villains are ready to make you eternal. Forget about whoever you are under that mask. You should be Batman with us. And then what he's saying is, so here's your chance. Just light the match and burn them alive. It's merciful. And if you don't, and then you try and kill me, you try and drop me off of a cliff, and instead of putting a bullet in my head, and he says to him in the new version, he's like, if you don't put a bullet in my head, Batman's like, you'll never survive this drop. I tweet the dialogue. So Batman's like, I want you to know something, you'll never survive this drop. And Joker's like, I'm telling you the truth, you love your family of villains more than, and he's like, well, then this is the death of that family, of you and me and the villains. And Joker's like, not unless you put a bullet in my head. And he's like, you won't survive the drop. And he's like, go ahead and fucking drop me then. See what happens. But unless you man up and put a bullet in my head, I will come back. And if you try to kill me by pussying out and dropping me, I will come back and hate you. And this event was about love. So what do you think he's going to do if he hates him? Do you know what I mean? Meaning if he comes back full of hatred and saying, now I don't love you anymore. And we don't. You know what I mean? It would be very fun to do that. If we ever do that, should we ever have plans to do that? should that be in store?
Black Lantern?
You left it hanging that Grant Morrison left a story. Are you going to take over the reins to write the debut comeback, or is he going to come back?
Well, I don't know if he's going to come back. I don't want to spoil any of that Robin speculation. But what I would say is mostly that Pete Tomasi, who's a great friend of mine, has handled that story. I mean, I am so moved by the way that he handled the relationship with Damian and Bruce, and that is one of the unsung heroes of comics, that book, Batman and Robin. It's one of the best books on the stands. That when Damian died, my feeling was like, I'm going to stay out of the way and let Pete do what he wants to do and not try and do a big issue about that. And that's why we went to Harper instead of that. So if you want the future of what's going to happen with Batman's feelings about Damian or Damian in any capacity, you go to that book, because that's really where it deserves to be, because he's done the most work with that. And I'm more interested in Bruce and his demented relationship with Gotham.
Watchmen?
Now that you're doing Batman, now that you've gone Superman Unchained, when are you taking over Justice League?
No, there's no plans for that, dude. Justice League is in great hands, and I can only handle. Yeah, I don't know. That's such a happy book. What?
You would want to do a team like that?
I might try a team someday, but I mean, right now I'm really happy. I mean, Superman is a lot to take on along with Batman. It really caused me a lot of anxiety this year to have them both, and when I gave up American Vampire for a short while, and then before I started The Wake, it was really much harder than I ever expected to not have a creator-owned. So taking on something like Justice League or another superhero book in addition to Batman is pretty hard. And I really want to buckle down and make this year the best year of Batman ever, because it's the 75th. So I don't have any plans really to take on much more superhero stuff. You know, maybe a little bit or something surprising and fun, but for the most part, I really want to focus on making Batman the best Batman it could possibly be to honor his 75th anniversary.
Batman back there?
So, do you have anything planned for the
Can you
future?
speak
like-
up, sweetheart?
Alright. Do you have anything planned in the future, like not related to superheroes wise? Like you're doing the week and you did Severed. Do you have any like hard, other side short stories planned?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of ideas, you know, and stuff and things I'd love to do. Right now with the Wake is, we're only on issue 2 or 3. So I mean, we still have a long way to go, you know. But yeah, I have a lot of ideas. I'd love to do creator run, but American Vampire is going to come back in the winter. I'm writing it right now with Raphael, so they're going to announce that in New York. That's probably a huge spoiler I shouldn't have said, but it's coming back. It's coming back in the winter, and I'm really proud of how it comes back. And we wanted to get ahead on it so Raphael can do most of the arcs. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I have a lot on my plate, creator run between American Vampire and the Wake for a bit, and Batman.
Back there in the white?
Sure. So even if you haven't killed anyone in the family, watching when you put Bruce through and for Valves, it's sort of like the first time you realize your parents are doing it. And it was sort of scary to watch. Like, how did you prepare yourself as a writer to have that play out? Something that sort of
Well, that's the only way I feel like you can go at the superhero. At least for me, like it's the only way I can approach superheroes that are 75 plus years old in a lot of cases, is to try and find a way of terrifying yourself about them, like what their weaknesses are, like they're these great heroes, and then you find the chink in their armor. So for example, like with Joker, I mean, that's what that's about. It's in the same with Court of Owls. It's always about trying to get under their skin for an emotional and psychological challenge. And with Superman, that's what it's about. I mean, I don't know how many of you were at that panel yesterday. Were a lot of you there?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to repeat myself, but you know, with Superman, it's the same thing, where like the whole challenge is to create a character that says you're nothing. Like what you do, you're in that. General Lane says to him, like, you're the greatest mass murderer in the history of humanity, basically, because you sit there and listen to people scream all day, and you don't change the world. Like you don't take down this warlord or that dictator. You just let them scream and scream until they die. And he's like, that is horrifying, and you are a villain. And this guy, Wraith, you know, who's fought for the American military secretly, and this group called the Machine, he's kind of the ghost in the machine, like the thing that pushes history forward, this ghost hand. You know, they're like, he's the guy that's the real hero, because he doesn't need to hear the sound of applause all day from people. You're just a show pony. You need to go around and hear, like, people thinking you're amazing and wonderful and all of that, and you're just a big coward, you know? So you get under their skin. I mean, that's the only way to do it, at least from my opinion, because you got to find a way of making them hurt, you know, emotionally, or what does it matter? You got to tear them apart to build them back up that way. So that's what we're going for in Unchained and in Zero Year too. But I mean, Zero Year is a lot more fun than the other stories, I think, right now, because it's very bombastic and fun, you know. But Superman, we're pretty dark. Like we're really cutting him next issue.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'll take the gentleman in the Batman shirt.
My personal preference, I don't want to say because I feel bad, because I mean I have a horse in the race, right, with that. I mean, I honestly would be happy with any, you know. I really think that the fate of Robin belongs in the hands of Tomasi and other writers that have dealt with the relationship of Batman and Robin. I'm just not. I mean, I'd love to write Batman and Robin at some point, but I have so many stories in my head for just Bruce and how pathological and heroic he is in his own weird way, that Robin is sort of an afterthought for me. So I would just sort of trust in whatever they're going to do and look to that storyline over there, you know, and I know they're going to do a great job with whatever decision they make.
Way in the back with the Red Sox.
I love when Dick Grayson was Batman. I think you had a lot to do with that. Did you feel like that was cut short a little bit? I've actually heard a lot of people talking about it more and more lately.
I had a lot of fun with that, man. I mean, Dick Grayson was a great introduction to writing Batman because he's so vulnerable and emotionally accessible that he tells you everything he's thinking. So, like, as somebody writing Batman for the first time, even though it was Dick Grayson, I got to voice all my anxieties and be like, God, maybe I'm not good enough for this, because he's like in the cowl for the first time. He's like, maybe I'm not good enough for this, you know. So that was a really nice transition in, and I miss writing Dick Grayson a lot.